Trustee Huff has joined.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to call this meeting of the Ottawa-Carleton District School Board to order, and I wish to acknowledge that our meeting is taking place on unceded and unsurrendered Algonquin territory. I would like to thank the Algonquin Nation for hosting us on their land. Could we have a motion to approve the agenda, please? I will note that since Mark Fisher is unable to be physically present with us this evening, we will defer his presentation to next month. So if we have the agenda moved without that item, that would probably be preferable. Trustee Lara, are you moving the motion?
I will move the agenda without item 3.
And do we have a seconder for that, please? Trustee Boothby. Are there any further amendments or discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, I'll call the question then on the agenda. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. That brings us to one of those bittersweet moments in the life of the Ottawa-Carleton District School Board when it is time to say goodbye and thank you to a very important member of our staff. I'd like to invite Superintendent Frank Wiley, please, to come forward. We don't always get you standing here in the middle of the room with us, so it's a nice change to have you out here. And I have to say, searching for a single word to describe Frank Wiley as a teacher, as a principal, as a superintendent, and as a person, and thinking back to what I've heard others say about him, the one word that has been consistent as long as I've known him is solid. Tonight, I think we really need to add another word to that: solid gold. Solid isn't the only word that's been offered. From the very beginning of his career in public education as a supply teacher in 1979, if you can believe that, don't look a day older, Frank has been an advocate for students, and especially for students facing challenges and barriers to further their education. As a teacher at Ottawa Tech in Ridgemont, at Laurentian and Woodruff, overseas in Italy, and home again at the adult high school, Frank has provided good guidance and caring support to thousands of students, many of whom needed some extra encouragement to succeed in school. After 3 years as principal of the adult high school and secondary alternate sites, he moved to Canterbury High School, where he served as principal for 8 years, in a school of tremendous diversity among its students, not just in terms of their personal characteristics, but also in terms of their academic passions. When he was appointed as the superintendent of instruction in 2010, we knew that Frank's capacity for reaching out and making productive connections with students, with staff, with community organizations would be invaluable. Whether being part of the team undertaking the OCDSB's seminal work on creativity, innovation, and critical thinking that culminated in the publication Unleashing Potential, Harnessing Possibilities in 2012, or leading the way to bring forward new strategies for conflict resolution and crisis management within the OCDSB and indeed around the world, Frank has repeatedly demonstrated that still waters run deep. Underneath that calm and unflappable exterior, there's a perennial ferment of practical and innovative ideas that bubble up to the surface, while the rest of us are still trying to figure out what the problem is, and what to do about it. And when he offers those ideas, Frank invariably does so with grace, modesty, and respect, giving us time to absorb them, to understand them, and to appreciate that, yes, once again, he's shifted us onto a good pathway forward. Frank's leadership is rooted in his deep concern for the well-being and learning of students and staff alike. That leadership and that concern have been recognized by external organizations that have honored him with awards recognizing his service to children and his commitment to peace building. Within the OCDSB, we don't hand out a lot of plaques and prizes, but we unequivocally recognize and respect your integrity and abilities whenever we try to describe you and find the only word that comes to mind is solid. Indeed, the only time I've ever known Frank's solidity to be challenged was one night years ago on a very well-polished dance floor in Kingston, after which he once again demonstrated grit and, yes, solidity over many painful weeks on crutches. Frank, you've been a leader and a mentor to so many of us for so many years that it's very hard to imagine what it will be like without your wise and quiet presence among us on a daily basis as we begin to actualize our plans for cultural change in the OCDSB. You've already led the way in demonstrating innovation, caring, and social responsibility. Solid is the word. Solid gold is the sentiment. So please, come and accept this memento of our appreciation for your unremitting service to our students. Thank you.
Thank you.
Last chance.
It's my last chance. Sorry for that. I've been honored to have served this organization for quite a number of years, as you know, and my passion has always been to ensure that the voices of kids and learners are heard. I can say with all honesty that I think you're on one of the most remarkable opportunities right now in the changes that are occurring at the board. And it's embodied by a leader who's extraordinary and has to drive every weekend, but is bringing about a change to us in thinking. And there's nothing greater than an organization that thinks. And so to that, while I am sad in some ways to be leaving, I'm thrilled with the sense of the leadership that you as a board have chosen for the next number of years. This is a moment of time of change. It's a moment of time to harness that change. And it's a moment of time to embrace that change. And in the leader who's there before you, it is in that person that you've entrusted that change to now be put to action. I shall watch from a distance, perhaps a long distance, in the changes that you're going to embark upon. And I wish you nothing short of the very best. I look forward to hearing the great things that are going to emerge out of here in your work plan. And to my colleagues at the senior table, I wish you the best of luck. And I thank you very much for the time and the honor to have served with you. Thank you. Thanks, Lynn. Yeah.
Moving on then with our agenda for this evening, I would like to call on our Vice Chair, Trustee Bronovan, for the report from the board in camera.
The board met in camera this evening and has no report.
Thank you, Trustee Bronovan. Now it comes to the chair's briefing, and I just have two things for you this evening. First of all, with regard to Rowan's Law Day, our first speaker series event on concussion management will take place on Rowan's Law Day on Wednesday, September the 25th at Longfield's Davidson Heights Secondary School. Led by Dr. André-Anne Ledoux, attendees will learn the causes of concussion, how to recognize a concussion, the neurobiology of a concussion, symptoms, recovery trajectory, and concussion management protocols on the return to learn and play. Secondly, the district is home to a wide range of diverse religious and cultural backgrounds, and we wish all of those who will be celebrating and recognizing upcoming holidays joy and happiness. We would like to acknowledge that upcoming, we have Rosh Hashanah on September the 30th, Dussehra or Vijayadashmi on the 7th of October, and Yom Kippur on the 9th of October. And that's all of my briefing this evening. Are there any questions? Seeing none, I'll turn to the director then for her briefing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I'd like to call to trustees' attention the graphic that they will have received at their table spaces outlining the summer work at the OCDSB. Over the summer, the OCDSB is engaged in a variety of different endeavors, and while it is that many of our students will have gone off on vacation for the 2 months or on holidays from the 2 months, you can see that the work doesn't stop. And so over the course of the 2 months of July and August, we were indeed engaged in many endeavors that involved not only students, but staff, as well as our facilities. So we wanted to provide trustees with a high-level overview of some of the endeavors that were undertaken during these 2 months. Fallingbrook Community Elementary School had a very auspicious moment yesterday. Proud to announce that on Monday, September the 23rd, the OCDSB, in partnership with Global Child Care Services, Art Studio Plus, and Fallingbrook Community Elementary School students unveiled their new outdoor mural. The school applied for and received funding through Crime Prevention Ottawa's Paint It Up program, sponsored by the City of Ottawa. The program aims to support youth empowerment, graffiti prevention, community safety, and the beautification of Ottawa neighborhoods. The one-of-a-kind masterpiece and its artistic vision was inspired, guided, sketched, and painted entirely by the Fallingbrook students. The mural project provided Fallingbrook Community Elementary School students with an incredible opportunity to demonstrate their skills and responsible citizenry. Well done, Team Fallingbrook. The Global Climate Strike. We know that some of our students are eager to attend the Global Climate Strike rally on Friday, September the 27th, this upcoming Friday. The Ottawa-Carleton District School Board remains committed to building a culture of social responsibility. We want our students to develop well-informed opinions regarding social issues such as climate change and to be able to express those views appropriately. As such, the district, in consultation with other districts across the province, has sent the following direction to schools. Should students decide to participate in the event, they should be encouraged to provide notice to the school and follow the regular sign-out procedures. Students should not be penalized for choosing to participate in this event, and staff should be cognizant of scheduling any major assignments on September the 27th. Schools will not be organizing field trips or other events in support of the proposed marches, but as always, teachers may choose to lead instruction regarding climate change, social responsibility, and other related topics where appropriate in their classes. Orange Shirt Day is coming up. It is an opportunity for First Nations and non-First Nations to raise awareness about the legacy of residential schools in Canada. Orange Shirt Day is held each year on September the 30th. OCDSB schools are commemorating Orange Shirt Day throughout the first week of October. And that's my report.
Thank you, Madam Director. Are there any questions for the Director? Seeing none, that brings us then to delegations. And we have 2 delegations this evening. Each delegation has 4 minutes to speak, and that will be followed by the opportunity for up to 3 questions from trustees for clarification. So we will begin by inviting Mr. Tom Dawson to come forward. Please find yourself a seat at the table opposite me. When you're ready, you can push the red button to turn your microphone on, and the time you have will count down on the timer up on the wall behind me.
Okay, thank you very much. This reminds me of a speech I wrote for somebody for the Parliamentary Committee. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak this evening and speak to the board directly. I sit before you today with 2 roles. The first role is a very proud dad of a wonderful 4-year-old girl who started junior kindergarten at Broadview a couple weeks ago. And the second role is the co-president of the Westboro Village Cooperative Preschool Board of Directors. It's a cooperative-run preschool in the Westboro area where my 2-year-old son currently attends and my daughter previously attended. I could go on and on tonight about my children, as I'm sure every parent and grandparent in this room can, but I'll get right to the point. The Westboro Village Cooperative Preschool, or WVCP, is a not-for-profit preschool that's been in the community for over 40 years, with a primary purpose of preparing our children for school. We're founded on the premise that children learn best through play, and that parental involvement is key to any child's success. The center is run by a passionate group of parents and a team of wonderful and supportive teaching staff. I'm joined this evening by our center director, Sabina, behind me here, who is as committed as the rest of us to continuing to make our center thrive in the community. Our preschool has successfully helped hundreds of children over these 40 years in preparing to enter the public school system, and I've spoken to dozens of families in the past couple of years who directly credit the WVCP for the seamless entry into kindergarten. I can speak to our experience as well, as my daughter jumped in with both feet very enthusiastically on her first day and has loved every minute of it, and of course all of her wonderful teachers and her alligator classroom. As for our center, we have been renting space from a church on Roosevelt Avenue for about 40 years, but we're finding the space is no longer meeting our needs as the requirements for licensed childcare centers become more restrictive. Some of these requirements restrict our ability to operate longer hours due to the lack of outdoor space, and our Ministry of Education inspector has told us on several occasions that our ability to add flexibility to our programs is greatly limited by the configuration of the space, although we've been grandfathered in so we can remain in this space. Finally, with our shortened hours, we're finding that a lot of families are starting to look for other centers because they need longer hours of care, and they're looking to other care providers in the community, even though they're very intrigued by our programs. So in order to stay in the neighborhood to serve the families of our community, we found that finding a suitable and affordable space was key, while keeping our tuition at a competitive rate. Looking around at what's available, obviously in the Westboro area, it's very difficult to find affordable space. We're also facing uncertainty with our grant from the province, not unlike what everybody's seen in the media around funding of our school systems. We're up against the same sort of challenges for childcare with the uncertainty of what these changes are and what our future looks like. So while we're searching out an alternative space, we became aware of vacant former childcare space at the Churchill Alternative School, just a few blocks away from us. Upon researching some previous requests for proposal on the website, we determined that the not-for-profit rates offered by the school board were actually very reasonable and something we could build into a business plan. So with that in mind, I contacted the planning department probably about 6 months ago. The staff were lovely to speak to, very friendly and professional, but they indicated that their hands were tied in being able to work with us, as there is an existing policy that gives current care providers with the school board first right of refusal for any space that opens up. This is kind of where my concerned parent brain kicks in, because I am concerned about the state of funding for all of us. And I really don't understand why there would be a policy in place that would prohibit us from being able to rent space. So by way of my presence tonight, I'm requesting that the board remove this policy if possible and open the space up for a request for proposal process so that we could compete for this. And if not, to work with us through the planning department to find suitable space. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for that. I do believe I have a question from Trustee Campbell first.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation. In prep for your presentation, I researched our policies, and I wasn't quite sure I could find the policy reference that you're making. So maybe later offline or now, whatever, if you could provide a specific policy reference and perhaps clarify whether you're talking about really just a first right of refusal concern, or whether which may have been refused in this case.
Okay. So
or there's something more serious. Yeah.
I had previously emailed with Trustee Bronovan about this. I'm not sure what the exact policy is. I'm not sure if you got a quote of what that was, but I can definitely look into it, or go back to our email exchange and see if I can find that.
Trustee Ellis?
I was wondering if staff would be able to comment on that, or we could give some information on, so that we have clarity around. I have the similar question. If it's a first right of refusal, have we sought our other providers to give them that first right? And if it's just a first right of refusal, once we're through that list, I would anticipate then that would be opened up to others, but perhaps a memo or some clarification for us would be helpful.
Did you have a question for the presenter, Trustee Ellis? Because that is what this time is for, and I will ask for a staff comment when we're done.
No, I guess I overstepped the rules.
We'll get to staff comment in response to your question and any other information they can share at this time. Are there any other questions from trustees? If not, I will ask the director.
Given that the presenter has indicated that you had a conversation with planning, I'm wondering if Manager Ostapchuk, no, she's shaking her head. So I think that what we would need to do is probably have a look at what particular policy it is. I'm not able to reference that out of my head, but Trustee Ellis did raise the potential around a memo. I see Superintendent Grigoriev arriving, so perhaps you're able to illuminate us. Thank you.
So I've just got the policy in front of me, and from what I can discern, it has to do with the third-party partners. So the language refers to partners, which would indicate that they are pre-existing partners, although that word isn't actually stated. So it's 4.16. Where there is a third-party partner delivering an extended day program on behalf of the district, a written agreement between the district and the partner shall be made that shall include but not limited to the issues, to the operational requirements, et cetera, et cetera. So it has the language of partner in it. So I think that may be the reference to it.
I believe so. And just for clarity, we're not looking to run an extended day program, just our existing preschool programs, but in a center with outdoor space.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm sure that we will be doing some follow-up with staff, and if there are some answers for you, we will certainly be providing them.
Thank you very much for your time.
Moving on then, our next delegation was requested by Meg Sears, and together with her is Martin Paul, with regard to health and learning and limiting exposure to Wi-Fi and wireless devices. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm Dr. Meg Sears. I chair Prevent Cancer Now, which is a national organization that aims to prevent cancer by eliminating preventable contributors to cancer. And the radiation from wireless devices is increasingly recognized as a contributor not only to cancer, but many other chronic illnesses, and it can impair child development. So I'm very delighted that Dr. Martin Powell is here. He is on actually a world tour of invited talks on this topic, so we're quite honored that he is spending some time with us today.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting us. I'm going to have a number of different slides that I'm going to go through very quickly, because most of them I basically have just time to tell you, yes, we have a lot of evidence on these things, and these are relevant to the issues of Wi-Fi and cell phone tower radiation in schools. So the first thing is, we know a lot about how EMFs work in our bodies to produce health impacts at very, very low levels of exposure. The second thing is, we know how they work to produce various kinds of pathophysiological effects, that is, damaging effects in the body. And so, and we don't have time to talk about the details of this at all. The third thing is that there are reasons why children are much more sensitive to EMFs than are adults. And so so it should be expected that the children in schools will be more sensitive because of that. This slide has a list of various kinds of health impacts that are extremely well documented, that occur from various EMFs at levels far, far below the safety guidelines. So they are, you can see there's all kinds of review articles that have been published on each of these. I'm just going to talk about two of these that I think are most relevant to the school situation. And those are the neurological and neuropsychiatric effects and the cardiac effects. So the neurological and neuropsychiatric effects are produced by many different EMFs, including Wi-Fi and cell phone tower radiation and so forth. And you get insomnia, fatigue, depression, headache, lack of concentration, cognitive dysfunction, anxiety, stress, agitation, memory dysfunction. These are things which we know are caused by EMFs. We know are cumulative in their effects, and these are the kinds of things that have been causing behavioral problems in schools all around North America that have Wi-Fi in the schools. There are also cardiac effects on the electrical control of the heart, which can cause sudden cardiac death. That's also been a problem in schools, where often defibrillators are now used to try to keep people alive who would be dead otherwise. So we do have safer alternatives to these things, and those are namely wired fiber optic systems. They're faster, they're more reliable, they're more secure than any of the wireless systems, and they have minimal negative impacts on health. They're also much more energy efficient. And even tablets and cell phones can be accessed wired using an adapter in many cases. Thank you very much. If there are questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I hope that you will be able to provide us with a copy of that so that we can circulate it to the trustees who were unable to be present this evening. I have a significant list of questioners, but I can only unfortunately take 3 according to our rules. So we'll begin with Trustee Penny.
Thanks a lot, Madam Chair, and thank you very much for presenting this information to us. It is just this small paper is somewhat concerning, but I'm just wondering if you could help me understand and have some further information on any epidemiological studies that have, that show definite causal type of either statistical inference or meeting the, the causation criteria. If you could let me know if there's any that you have, I'd appreciate seeing that.
Yeah, I can send you a copy of the paper that I published on the neurological neuropsychiatric effects. It's not just epidemiology. There are experimental studies that show this in humans And there are experimental studies that show that there is a massive deterioration in the brain structure in animals who are exposed to these same kinds of fields. So we think that the changes in the brain structure in the animals is the underlying cause of all of this. And let me just say, I didn't have a chance to talk about the mechanisms, but the mechanisms that I presented here, we know how they can produce these effects.
Thank you very much. Next, I have Trustee Schwartz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you very much to both of you as presenters. I believe, Dr. Sears, you and I go back long ago when I was with the Canadian Institute of Child Health working on environmental health. And so, so nice to see you again. I guess my question really is, and it's to follow my colleague's question around epidemiological studies. And I mean, I certainly would be quite interested to see the work done. My question's really around where's the WHO and the World Health Organization's perspective on this currently, on this issue?
The World Health Organization has not updated any of their perspective on this since 2005. So they're completely out of date. They have been promising an updated, very large review since 2010, and it's still, we keep hoping that it's going to happen. The International Agency for Research on Cancer is within the WHO, and in 2011, they concluded on the basis of the information at that time that this type of radiation was possibly a human carcinogen. Now, I've circulated this evening material that was provided. It's really an excerpt from a paper that I co-authored along with others, including Dr. Anthony Miller, who is a very esteemed Canadian epidemiologist. And he actually worked with the WHO on that review. And he and other people who were there at the time say that the evidence today, including Canadian epidemiology and 2 very large animal studies and other epidemiology, brings them to the conclusion that should the WHO, should IARC, International Agency for Research on Cancer, re-examine this issue today, that they would come to the conclusion that radiofrequency radiation from cell phones, Wi-Fi, et cetera, would be classified as a known human carcinogen. It's very strong evidence now, and this is not a long-standing, and it's an evolving kind of exposure, but the evidence is very strong that it causes cancer. And if it can cause cancer, it's causing cellular disruption that is going to have a lot of other effects as well.
And Trustee Lyra, did I see your hand?
I'm wondering, since both of you mentioned that you have authored papers on this topic, what potential conflict of interests you might have in trying to push this sort of information?
I don't have any, my commitment is to the science. So I don't make any money off of this. I have no conflict of interest. In contrast to that, the industry has a multi-trillion-dollar conflict of interest, so you might keep that in mind.
I chair Prevent Cancer Now, and I work very long hours doing so, free and for nothing. It's a volunteer position. I have volunteered, as other people know, in the context of many environmental health issues around Ottawa-Carleton and nationally and internationally. I receive very little compensation for other environmental work. I've received no compensation for any of the papers that I have authored. And so really there's no conflict of interest whatsoever. My interest, I have an interest, and that's in health, and particularly health of children. And also environmental health, but in this case, particularly the health of children. So it's not a conflict, it's just an interest.
Thank you very much for that. And that brings us to the end of our questions. We certainly appreciate your taking the time and making the effort to be here with us this evening to share the information that you bring. And I'm sure we will be having more fruitful discussions down the road. Thank you. And that brings us to our final delegation this evening. This is a 2-minute delegation, and again, there will be up to 3 questions for clarification at the end. I invite Michelle Meyer to come forward, also on the topic of the biological effects of radiation from Wi-Fi and cell phones. Welcome.
Good evening, trustees. I am the mother of a young man who's just turned 17. Or I should say he's just about to turn 18, and he graduated from Nepean in the high school last year. He was diagnosed in February, March of 2018 with a rare form of brain cancer, which was an incredible shock to our family. I wanted to share with you the fact that my child received a smartphone when he was about 12 years old, and I expressed extreme concern to his father and wanted to know whether this was a good thing. He carried this phone in his pocket, used it extensively, and was even encouraged in high school classrooms to use it as a source of information. I also happen to be a naturopathic doctor, so I see many children as well as adults, and we're seeing increased incidence of all kinds of things, including cancers, attention deficit disorder. But I would like to share, just because it happened on such a personal level, how shocking it was for me to realize that a child who was raised with incredible health, with organic food, with lots of exercise, and with a lot of awareness, even filtered water, air filters, you name it, in our home, as you can imagine, because I work in natural medicine, to have had him suffer brain cancer is something where I just want to appeal to each and every one of you. There are things going on in our environment, and particularly we have a great concern about the electromagnetic fields created by smartphones, Wi-Fi in the schools, and I implore you to keep researching and doing something about this matter. It's a serious problem. If my child can have brain cancer, just imagine those of average families who are not specialized with health awareness. Just imagine what could happen in the future. So please do take this seriously. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Are there any questions for Ms. Meyer? Seeing none, thank you again for all of you for coming this evening. And this brings us to our matters for action, beginning with confirmation of our board minutes from the 24th of June, 2019. Would someone like to move confirmation? Trustee Campbell, seconded by Trustee Ellis. Are there any errors or omissions in these minutes? Trustee Ellis.
Thank you. On page 17, at the bottom, the voting record shows me as abstaining on that vote when I voted against.
And it also, I see, shows you as voting in favor. So you vote,
Okay.
you should be removed from the list of in favor.
As in favor, so
and
yes.
from the
I
list
didn't
of
see that one.
abstentions. Thank you for that. Are there any other errors or omissions? Seeing none, then I'll call the question on confirming these minutes as amended. All those in favor? And opposed? The motion is carried. Is there any business arising from the board minutes of the 24th of June? If not, then I would like to invite Vice Chair Bronovan to present the Committee of the Whole report from the 17th of September 2019.
Thank you. I'll look for somebody to move receipt of the...
You can move receipt.
I can move receipt, then I'll move receipt and look for somebody
And do we have a seconder? Trustee Boothby will second that. Are there any errors or omissions in the report from Committee of the Whole? Trustee Boothby.
Thank you. On page 35 or 39 under new business, under my paragraph, if we can just put at the end of that, and the impediments to hiring.
Thank you for that. Are there any other errors or omissions? Student Trustee Widjawira. Thank you, and I'll ask that the rest of the document be double-checked for spelling too. Anything else? If not, then I'll call the question on receipt of the Committee of the Whole report as amended. All those in favor? And opposed? And that motion is carried. Trustee Brownhaven.
On page 34, on a motion by Trustee Blackburn that I will second, that the board affirm the pupil accommodation review par under board policy P.118.PLG is not required for this review, and B, that the board approve the timeline and consultation plan attached as Appendix B and C to report 19-077 in order to consult with local school communities and the public.
Is this a consent item? It is. Let's move forward to the remainder of the recommendations and see where we are.
Sure. On page 35, on a motion by Trustee Lyra, that the board authorize staff to proceed with initiating the supervisory officer selection process, including a job posting as outlined in report 19-086, effective immediately.
And this one will require us to, oh no, this doesn't require us to do anything. So is this one a consent item also? In that case, I will call Trustee Boothby.
If I can just ask a quick question. Not sure if I can ask this question here. Do we need to modify this, given information we got today?
Madam Director.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, we don't need to make an amendment. The way that we have proceeded opens us up to being able to follow through as needed.
So is this, I ask again, is this a consent item? And if it is, then I will call the question on the two recommendations from Committee of the Whole. This will be a recorded vote. All those in favor?
Trustee Huff in favor.
Trustee Boothby, Trustee Blackburn, Trustee Huff, Trustee Campbell, Trustee Ellis, Trustee Jennings on the phone? No. Trustee Penny, Trustee Brownhaven, Trustee Evans, and Trustee Schwartz. Trustee Schwartz. Trustee Fisher on the phone? No. Trustee Scott.
And I think that was unanimous of those present, just to be sure. Anybody opposed? And there are none opposed. So that is carried unanimously of those present. We have then no non-consent items, so that brings us to item 9.5 on our agenda, provisions for calling extraordinary meetings of the board and appointing trustees to a strike management committee. This is at folio 47 in your written package, and you will find it as item 9.5 if you're using the e-scribe. Madam Director.
At this time, I'd like to ask Superintendent McCoy to come forward to bring us through this report.
So through you, Madam Chair, as part of the selection process, the board is required to appoint 2 additional trustees to support the process. And
This is
sorry.
the extraordinary meetings one.
My
There are 2
apologies.
pieces.
Wrong item. So through you, Madam Chair, normally as we move into collective bargaining processes, it is a normal practice for the board to pass this motion, which will put the board in a better position to respond quickly if and when it's required to provide direction to staff or to receive recommendations and to respond to issues on short notice.
Thank you. The recommendations, first to invoke the provisions for extraordinary board meetings, and secondly, to begin the process for appointments to a strike management committee, are on folio 48. So do we have a mover for any of those, or? Trustee Schwartz, are you willing to move? And seconded by Trustee Campbell. On part A, can we call the question? All those in favor of Part A, calling extraordinary meetings? Recorded vote.
Calling the vote. Trustee Huff?
Trustee Huff in favor.
Trustee Campbell? Trustee Ellis? Trustee Penny? Trustee Evans? Trustee Bronovan? And Trustee Schwartz?
And opposed? And none opposed. And as far as the strike committee is concerned, are there nominations, volunteers? Don't all put your hands up at once. Let's start with Trustee Blackburn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to nominate Trustee Boothby.
And is there a seconder for that nomination? Trustee Bronovan, do you accept the nomination, Trustee Boothby? Do we have other recommendations? Trustee Schwartz?
I'd like to nominate Trustee Blackburn.
And do we have a seconder for that? Trustee Bronovan? Do you accept the nomination, Trustee Blackburn?
I do, Madam Chair.
And do we have further nominations? Trustee Lyra?
I would like to self-nominate.
And Trustee Lyra is self-nominating. Do we have a seconder for Trustee Lyra? Trustee Ellis, thank you. I don't need to ask if you accept that. And do we have any other nominations? So we have 3 names nominated, and that means we will have to have an election.
How does Trustee Huff participate in this?
Staff will work out that she can provide her secret ballot, not a problem. And do we have scrutineers appointed, Madam Director?
Superintendent McCoy and Executive Officer Giroux will carry out our process for us.
And provisions have been made to get Trustee Huff's vote as well? Good, thank you. I forgot to say to vote for 2. I hope everybody remembered to vote for 2. Because we're appointing 2 people. Because if some people were unclear that they could vote for 2 people, we can recall the ballot and do it over again. Yes. But what I wasn't sure, because I forgot to mention that, was that everybody knew that.
Madam Chair, I may have messed up my ballot on that basis.
In that case, we should just do the voting all over again right away. Sorry about that. The new ballots will be distributed in just a moment. So you may vote for up to 2 people because there are 2 positions. So it looks as though we will need a second ballot. Trustee Boothby is elected to the Strike Management Committee. So the second ballot will be choose one of two names remaining, Trustee Blackburn, Trustee Lara. The ballots are just being distributed. And Trustee Huff, if you could please call Ms. Giroux again. give everybody a chance to get settled again here. From this second real ballot, Trustee Blackburn is elected. So congratulations to Trustees Boothby and Blackburn, and we need a motion then to add in that the board appoint Trustee Blackburn and Trustee Boothby and Trustee Blackburn as members of the Strike Management Committee. Trustee Schwartz already previously moved that, and it was duly second, but without the names. So I will call the question then on the motion to confirm Trustees Boothby and Blackburn. And again, I think this is a recorded vote also. All those in favor?
Trustee Scott, Trustee Boothby, Trustee Blackburn, Trustee Huff,
Trustee Huff in favor.
Trustee Campbell, Trustee Ellis, Trustee Penny, Trustee Lyra, Trustee Bronovan, Trustee Schwartz, and Trustee Scott.
And that is carried unanimously. So moving on then to the next item on our agenda, we have approval of the board work plan and key areas of focus for 2019-2020. And again, I would like to invite the director to introduce this because her staff have done some very fine work for us to put together some of the thoughts that had been put forward by trustees. Madam Director.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. The results that you see here is a synopsis and a synthesis of the work that trustees undertook on the 5th of September. And I'd like to call on Executive Officer to introduce the report and to help us through any questions that arise.
Thank you, Madam Director, and through you, Madam Chair. As part of its governance practices, the Board of Trustees has a policy which governs an annual evaluation process. And this year, the board conducted its self-evaluation on the 5th of September. And as part of that process, the board is to identify key areas of focus for the coming year, which are to be approved prior to the end of September. And included with that is the board work plan. The report in your package shows sort of summary of the discussions held at the board reflection and some of the issues raised. A lot of discussion around the board's new strategic plan and a recognition that the board's work plan, in addition to its fiduciary duties, should focus on some of the professional development needs that the board might have in order to effectively implement and monitor the new strategic plan over the next 4 years. The work plan is attached on folio. I can't see it, but I think it's 55. And happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Ms. Giroux, and thanks very much to all of the staff who contributed to taking notes and putting this together coming out of our discussion at our professional development session. I know that some people have expressed an interest in having further discussion of this than would normally be permissible under board rules, and therefore the floor is open to have a motion to move into rules of committee if the board so desires. But if not, there is a recommendation to approve this on folio 54 or on of your package, or the last page of the report 19-090. So the floor is open. Don't all put your hands up at once. Trustee Lara.
I will make a motion to move us to committee of the whole.
Into committee, rules of committee. Seconded by Trustee Boothby. All those in favor? And opposed, and that motion is carried. So we are now in rules of committee, which means trustees may speak more than once to the item, and we will not be having any recorded votes in committee. So who would like to begin? Trustee Lara.
I might be beginning to sound like a bit of a broken record, but I'm looking under cultural social responsibility, and I'm not seeing the environmental push that I was really hoping to see in the upcoming year's work plan. I'm wondering where it is that our wonderful little tree with a pencil symbol has been lost in our effort to moving forwards for this year. I'm wondering. We are allowed to change this at the table here, and so I'm going to ask my fellow trustees, without putting a motion on the table, how do people feel about rewriting this to include something more related to the environment?
Trustee Lara, we don't have a motion on the floor, so right now there's nothing to amend. The recommendation would be to approve the work plan, and once that is on the floor, then it would be possible to make amendments to the work plan as drafted that you see on as Appendix A to this report. So if there's something that should be added to the learning opportunities section, or if there is something that should be reworded within that section, those kinds of amendments would be very much in order.
Okay, so I guess I will move the recommendation on Folio 54 with a request that we look to amend it.
Before we get to amendments, let's get a seconder for that. Oh, sorry, we're in rules of committee, so we do not need a seconder at the moment. And so you're inviting possible amendments. Trustee Campbell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When we had the PD as some preliminary discussion around this, I've accepted that the general drift of the board is towards creating effectively a learning plan for the board. This is at the governance level. One could argue that it's properly within the board domain to be concerned with its governance responsibilities. To me, and I was going to save it for new business towards the end of the meeting, and maybe I still will. To me, the meat of operationalizing the strat plan, including the environment, but several other initiatives, really is expressed best in the draft staff action plan. This document really is focused on our governance responsibilities in its current general form. Learning opportunities. I'm open to the idea of additional learning opportunities or around the environment and or other areas. But I broadly accepted, I guess, the general nature of the kind of work that the board has may decide to undertake, really looking to its own culture. Thank you.
Thank you for that, and I would note that we do have strategic plan measurement reports listed among the fiduciary responsibilities, but a great deal will be coming forward to us from the staff operational plan. Other speakers to the recommendation? Trustee Lara.
So right now I'm looking at key areas of focus, and I think that we as a board should do whether it's some education into the impact or the ways that we could look to improve our environmental impact as a board, or whether we should just have more of a push towards educating students about the environmental impacts that society is having, or I think that we could work the environment into this year goal without it seeming so ham-fisted. Right now, I'm looking at culture of social responsibility, and we right now have strengthen our community through ethical leadership, equitable practices, and responsible stewardship. Seeing as we have a list, I don't think it unreasonable to have environmental knowledge or environmental understanding on that list. And so I'm going to make a motion to include environmental understanding between ethical leadership and equitable practices.
I will ask for staff comment on that because I think we want to be very clear that this is the language of the strategic plan, which we've already approved, and this is our work plan. So I'm not sure whether we can make the amendment in the key areas of focus, although we might very well add something to the work of the board in terms of the learning opportunities or our fiduciary responsibilities. But I'll ask for staff comment.
I think it's at the discretion of the board. This is the board work plan, and there's no specific requirement on the template. The chair is correct in that the language that was used in the key areas of focus came directly from the strategic plan. If the amendment is made to the work plan to adjust the language, it would be exclusively to the work plan. It would not be amending the strategic plan. And so as long as folks are clear about that, that would be fine.
Thank you for that. So Trustee Lara, what would you like to do?
So I think that in any given year you can have specific focuses in a strategic plan. You can say this year we're going to focus on one thing, next year we can focus on something different. And given the public awareness that's being raised around climate issues at this particular moment as we sit in the climate protest week that is happening, I don't think it unreasonable to say maybe we should try and focus on the environment a little more this year, and next year if we think we've done a really good job we can take it off of our list of things to do.
I have no one else on my speakers list at the moment, so please continue.
So from what I heard from Executive Officer Giroux, there's nothing stopping an amendment to the key areas of focus under cultural social responsibility to include an environmental piece. And so I'm going to move an amendment that we add into strengthen our community through ethical leadership, equitable practices, and responsible stewardship, add environmental understanding or commitment to environmental knowledge into that list.
Which is it?
Commitment to environmental understanding.
Commitment to environmental understanding. To add that before or after responsible stewardship?
I had it between ethical leadership and equitable practices, but...
So after ethical leadership to add commitment to environmental understanding.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So discussion on the proposed amendment. Trustee Campbell.
Thank you very much. Well, I appreciate the interest and the passion around this. The three statements up top, which are, I guess, intended to be framing, we're subject to an awful lot of debate in terms of how much focus on environmentalism the board wanted to burn in or not to those statements. From my perspective, we've sort of had that debate. I guess I'm not personally open to altering that text. I would be open to adding or modifying a learning opportunity or adding or modifying a fiduciary responsibility. I guess that's where I would come from. I'm not personally, I think, open to changing the framing statements. I think that might create some confusion with respect to our commitment to the strat plan. And given the passion of the trustee, I suspect their concern is more than a one-year concern. Thank you.
Trustee Schwartz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And like Trustee Campbell, I'm also not in favor of shifting the key areas of focus and the language in there. I think responsible stewardship does cover environment, and very clearly in the strategic plan it does cover that. And you know I support your passion for environmental protection and stewardship. I mean, I share that I run an environmental charity. I just think there isn't I think it would be better placed as an ongoing item in the learning opportunities part, because I think those are the deliveries that we're expecting. And if perhaps there's an area for staff to focus, maybe in future years, we could look at language to craft into that.
Are there any other speakers on the amendment?
Trustee Huff would like to speak.
Please go ahead.
I would like to further that comment in that I think that environmental stewardship is paramount, and it's something that we need to take very seriously. I share Trustee Lyra's passion for this issue. I think it's something that we are just putting lip service to, and there needs to be more work to it. Do I think it matters whether it appears in the language of the key areas of focus? Probably not, because I don't think that really, in the big scheme of things, they are going to create any difference in what is done or is not done. I do think, however, having it as a very clear point in learning opportunities and or fiduciary responsibilities is absolutely imperative. We must have something about what our role is as a public organization, as an organization that is responsible for teaching young people their role in protecting their world. We have to step up here, and it needs to be included in some form. So I would, in the spirit of trying to be cooperative and keeping the strategic plan language and the work plan language congruent, let's roll with that. But I think that we really must add something very significant into the learning opportunities.
Thank you, Trustee Huff. Other speakers on the amendment? Seeing none, then I will go back to Trustee Lyra for wrap-up on the amendment before we call the question on it.
So this amendment is going to fail. I'm in the middle of drafting a learning opportunities and fiduciary responsibilities. I don't know why I couldn't read that. And so I know this one's going to fail, but I'll be right back in a moment.
So I will call the question on the proposed amendment to add commitment to environmental understanding as one of the items in the list under cultural in key areas of focus under cultural of social responsibility. All those in favor and opposed? And the amendment fails. And
Madam Chair, Superintendent Carson had a suggestion that you might consider, and that is we do have an annual energy management report that comes to the board, and we might reflect that under your fiduciary responsibilities, and that might be an opportunity for us to increase awareness, because we do some awareness building in relation to the content of that report.
Thank you for that, Ms. Giroux. That's certainly something that a trustee could propose doing. There may also be other language either in addition to that or instead of that. Trustee Lyra.
So I think I still have the floor, but I don't think I have a full 3 minutes left.
Well, we just took the vote, so you're starting again with the beginning of 3 minutes.
Neat. So I would like to make an amendment to fiduciary responsibilities to include evaluate additional costs associated with climate-friendly alternatives to current practices.
Could you say that again, please, a little slower?
Evaluate additional costs associated with climate-friendly alternatives to current practices.
And that would be included under fiduciary responsibilities?
Yes.
And did you have any further introduction for that?
So I think this is a reasonable thing that we could be doing. I think that it's not unreasonable for the board to look at what costs there might be to a climate-friendly alternative to a practice that we're currently going, whether it is more climate-friendly portables or whether it is upgrading of boiler systems to something that is more energy efficient, those things would have an additional cost, and we could look at that and say, what are the extra costs to these sorts of things, and what might we be willing to look at going forwards.
And again, I will ask for staff comment, and I have several people on my speakers list. So any comment from staff on that? Seeing that
This is the board's work plan, and there's no prescribed format to the work plan. I guess the only advice we can offer is the fiduciary responsibilities have been structured in a way that they reflect sort of the annual fiduciary roles of the board as opposed to additional one-time things. But again, this is the board's work plan, and you have that discretion, so I think it's at the will of the board. I don't know if Superintendent Carson has anything he wants to add to that.
Trustee Schwartz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I support in principle the concept that's being proposed here. And I think my only caution here is that we can go down quite a rabbit hole when looking at additional costs, and we would probably want to put some parameters around that, because you can evaluate transportation, boiler systems, et cetera, and you can start going deep and creating a lot of work for staff. I think perhaps one way that we might be able to deal with it, and I'm looking at it within the context of learning opportunity of use of data and measurement metrics, but also because this is a measurement. It's also how large organizations manage their facilities, and I think to the point that that Michelle was raising with respect to the annual energy report, I think we could potentially ask for one area to be considered in terms of what those additional costs would be. But I would hate to ask staff to look at the whole gamut, because that's a huge undertaking. So I'm reflecting on that. I can't support the motion as written because I'm concerned the rabbit hole that we would end up going down. But if we wanted to start with a project, it would be within the context of the energy report, I would think.
Thank you, Trustee Schwartz. Trustee Blackburn, on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, I share the exact same concern that Trustee Schwartz just expressed, because this is a really, really big organization that does a lot of different things. And if this is a board work plan, like, this work seems very staff-oriented, that the staff would have to do the evaluation. And I don't know if I can ask through you to the mover, to staff, like, or this seems really, really big and unmanageable and not able to be operationalized very easily. So I'd like somebody to comment on that.
Madam Director.
I'll ask Superintendent Carson to take a question.
I think, pardon me, I think, Madam Chair, the way we look at it, we ask those questions every day as we're evaluating what we do. Sometimes we do it informally, sometimes we do it formally. I'm just thinking, the Energy Management and Environmental Initiatives Program, maybe there's a couple of things we need to do in there. Explain the process that we do follow and where it is reasonable. We can always, as we try to do in our reports, make sure we specifically mention it. There have been times in the past where we've explicitly said, we can't do this because we can't afford to do it, we'll do this instead. But it is, the way it's currently worded, it is extremely wide open. And I think it's easier for us, when I say us are wearing our facilities and environmental hat, it's fairly easy. When we get to things like everything from transportation to some of the stuff that we buy, it becomes more complicated. So I don't think we want to be that open-ended. But I hear what's being said, and we can certainly try to make sure that some of that is addressed in the report that we bring forward in January or February.
Thank you for that. Anything further, Trustee Blackburn?
Well, thank you.
Trustee Campbell.
Thank you. So I can consider changes to learning opportunities or fiduciary responsibilities as stated. However, looking through some of the bullets here, I guess on the one hand, I'm concerned about the open-endedness. However, maybe that could be narrowed down with further discussion and review. However, I'm also wondering whether we really want to elevate that work or investigation or concern above all others with respect to effectively our strat plan. And I'm drawn to the first bullet under learning opportunities, which is align and prioritize. To me, a lot falls under that. Align and prioritize the work of the board with the 2019 to 2023 strat plan. And that would include all manner of things, right? Including our agreed involvement of our concern with environmentalism and environmental action and knowledge, amongst many other initiatives which we had a long discussion around. So I guess I'm a little bit concerned in a sense at this sort of stage where we effectively that first bullet is in a sense treating everything that we arrived at in the strat plan after some discussion in a sense in an equal manner with respect to the our considerations and discussion around that. And then here we might be saying, you know, notwithstanding that, we want to make this a priority. And so that, I guess, gives me some discomfort. So listen to the debate, but I am concerned about signaling that we regard one issue with, you know, significantly greater primacy, because I mean, we could put a whole bunch of things in here, significantly greater primacy than other issues. So I'll listen to the debate, and that's it. Thank you.
Trustee Bronovan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to propose a sub-amendment, and I would like it to state that it starts with understand the evaluation of additional costs associated with climate-friendly alternatives to current practices and be included under learning opportunities instead of fiduciary responsibilities. It then more lines up with the language that we have under learning opportunities, and it sounds as though we are doing a fair amount of this anyway, and that the CFO would be able to bring us that to our attention in the reports that are coming early in the year, and that might help us better understand what it is we are already doing.
Thank you for that, Trustee Bronovan. That is a rather large and cumbersome kind of thing to try to do as a sub-amendment. I think it would probably be preferable to see what the fate of the current proposal on the floor is, and and perhaps then we could have a brief recess and do a little bit of thrashing out of language so that we would be able to put something on the floor that would not require procedural gyrations to get to deal with.
Sounds like you're calling my sub-amendment out of order.
It's not entirely out of order, but it is borderline in terms of how we can deal with it, because you're moving the category, you're changing the language. It's not exactly a direct negative, but it's partly a direct saying you don't put it under fiduciary responsibilities. So I think it would be probably better to deal with it separately.
I will withdraw my sub-amendment.
Thank you very much. So if there is no further discussion on the currently proposed amendment, and bearing in mind that it is possible that we can work out some different language if we actually have a chance to just sit down and chew over it as a group for a few minutes, those who are interested. I will go back to Trustee Lyra for wrap-up. So I think there is some interest in the idea, the challenge is figuring out how to make it work. Trustee Lara.
In an effort to keep our colleagues on the phone sort of included, I think it's important to leave this as a fiduciary responsibility because, a fiduciary responsibility, because I think that the board has an ethical responsibility to look at how we can both use our financial resources responsibly and also manage our environmental impacts responsibly. I think that it is really important that we treat our environmental impact as something quite serious. And I understand that learning opportunities are great. We get to learn more about it, but I think that it shouldn't just be about our learning. I think that it should be about how we, the influence that we have on the system and our ability to impact the system.
Thank you, Trustee Lyra. So I will call the question on the amendment, which was to add into fiduciary responsibilities, evaluate additional costs associated with climate-friendly alternatives to current practices. All those in favor? And opposed? And the amendment fails. And I will now call a brief recess. I will say 5 minutes because I know that usually means 10. Could everybody please take their seats again? I'd like to call us back to order. And so now that we're back again, Trustee Lyra, did you have something to put forward here?
I would like to propose an amendment to the second last bullet where it says "and," to say, "and where climate-friendly alternatives can be incorporated in current practices and projects."
Any further introduction for this one?
So I've spoken with a number of my colleagues about this. We feel like this is a good place to put this. It falls under knowledge. It'll give us a background to talk about when projects are brought forward. So it'll give us a place to fall back on and be like, did we look at alternatives? What do we think? Yeah, no, nothing else.
Thank you. So I will ask, first of all, if this amendment is friendly. And if it's not, did I see somebody saying it's not friendly? It's not friendly, so open the floor to discussion, debate on the amendment. This is the front page, the front page of the Appendix A of the board work plan, or sorry. Under learning opportunities. Trustee Schwartz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I support this amendment. I think in discussion with Trustee Lyra, understanding what was intended, and then also discussing in practice what we can expect in terms of reporting from staff, and how this is really a signal to staff of the kind of information that we might be looking for. And an example was when we had been talking about the purchase of new portables, for example, and I had asked what kind of alternatives did we look at, what's the cost associated with those. I trust staff have looked at those alternatives and the costs associated, but that's the kind of information I think we're actually wanting to see. So with this amendment, actually allows for staff to start working on that. I don't think this then suggests, unlike the previous amendment, that it's kind of everything needs to be captured. We can then look at a few specific items, such as in the energy management plan, showing and demonstrating to trustees how some of the analysis is actually done, and that fits well into the facilities piece, because it is about managing facilities as well. So I support this amendment.
Thank you, Trustee Schwartz. Trustee Blackburn, on the amendment?
I'm good, Madam Chair.
Trustee Campbell?
Yes, I guess what I just want to maybe understand, and maybe it's worth clarifying if there wasn't an issue. I'm generally okay with this, I think. And I appreciate Trustee Lyra's and everybody else's contributions and efforts discussing this. But I imagine, and I have to think back in terms of the PD session and maybe other conversations, that this bullet had already stood for some things. So I don't mind adding this in, but my understanding of the intent, at least, isn't that last bullet, in a sense, gets taken over and devoted to this, but that this would be something additional. And so I guess I'd like to, unless it's judged needless, sub-amend to preface the suggested clause with the word "including."
So, Trustee Campbell, you're proposing to add the word "including" preceding the word "where"? And as a sub-amendment, is this a friendly sub-amendment? Does everyone understand what it is? It is not friendly, Trustee Lowry? It is not friendly. Any introduction, Trustee Campbell?
Thank you very much. So I guess I'd like this second last bullet to be understood, perhaps not uniquely in terms of climate-friendly alternatives. There may well have been, before this concern was brought to the fore in this forum, other understandings and expectations with respect to what the board might learn around how large organizations manage their facilities, perhaps not exclusively in this regard. If I'm wrong, then perhaps someone could advise me. But since I suspect that that's the case, what I'd like to suggest is adding the word including, which implies, therefore, that the board is interested in understanding how large organizations manage their facilities, not only in this way, but in other ways as well. And so I think it's important to add the word including.
Further discussion on the sub-amendment? If there is no further discussion, do you have any wrap-up, Trustee Campbell? No wrap-up, so I will call the question on the sub-amendment. All those in favor? And the sub-amendment is carried, so the word including is now incorporated in the amendment. Any further discussion on the amendment? Back then to Trustee Lyra for wrap-up.
Sorry about making that not friendly. I was convinced by Trustee Campbell's argument. Nothing further.
In that case, I will call the question on the amendment. Everyone understands what it is. All those in favor? Trustee Huff, are you with us?
I'm trying to find the mute button. Yes, I'm in favor.
And opposed, and that motion is carried. So anything further on the motion to approve the board work plan, which has now been amended? Trustee Ellis.
I'd like some clarification around under fiduciary responsibilities, the third last bullet. I'm just wondering, have we, as a board, sort of approved an integrity commissioner? And if not, does this bind us to retaining an integrity commissioner?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'll start with the last question. I don't think the work plan would bind you to that. The board did make some decisions last year through amendments to its code of conduct, where the code of conduct was amended to incorporate a role for the integrity commissioner, and those amendments do not come into effect until such time as the board appoints an integrity commissioner. So the Ad-Hoc Committee on Code of Conduct, is that the right name? The Ad-Hoc Committee has been working on the development of a policy which would govern the appointment of an integrity commissioner, and also an appointment process, and that will come to the board, I anticipate, late October or early November. And at that point, the board can make a decision about whether or not it supports the policy. It is possible, I guess, that the board could choose not to proceed with the policy, in which case the amendments that it has already made to the Code of Conduct would never come into effect, so there's still room to make that decision.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, it mentions under fiduciary the integrity commissioner. We haven't had a discussion, I don't think, at committee of the whole or board about the cost of the integrity commissioner at this point. Would that be, are we waiting for the policy? I'm just trying to understand why it's here when I don't think we've explicitly approved an integrity commissioner.
So you have directed us to do the work that gets to the policy and the appointment process for an integrity commissioner. The board still has opportunities to reconsider that by not introducing the policy. When we bring forward the report with the policy, we will have some cost estimates, and we'll explain the process by which the appointment would be made and how the cost may be impacted at that point.
Trustee Ellis, if you're thinking about an amendment here, and certainly an amendment is possible, you might want to consider, if this language concerns you, simply making it consideration of an integrity commissioner instead of saying adopt policy and retain an integrity commissioner, which may go one step further than at this point we are.
No, that's fine. I'm done. Thank you.
Further discussion then on the board work plan? If there is none, we can go back to the mover for wrap-up on the work plan. Trustee Lyra?
I am happier with this than I was when we started, so let's vote on it.
And I will call the question then on the work plan, and remembering we are still under rules of committee, so we're going to have to do this again when we get back into board proper. All those in favor of the work plan as amended?
Huff in favor.
And opposed? And that motion is carried. And if we're finished this discussion, we need a motion. Trustee Bronovan?
I'd like to move that we move back to rules of board.
Thank you. All those in favor of returning to board rules? And that motion is carried. So we are now back in board. And while we were in rules of committee, we did approve a recommendation, which, because it was moved in committee, has not been seconded. Trustee Bronovan, would you like to present that?
On a recommendation by Trustee Lyra, that the 2019-2020 board, which I will second, the 2019-2020 board work plan and key areas of focus as outlined in Appendix A to Report 19-090, this is so fun, be approved as amended.
Thank you for that. Is there any need for further introduction or debate, or can I just call the question? I will just call the question then, and this will be a recorded vote. All those in favor?
Huff in favor.
Trustee Scott, Trustee Boothby, Trustee Blackburn, Trustee Campbell, Trustee Huff, Trustee Lyra, Trustee Penny, Trustee Bronovan, and Trustee Schwartz.
And opposed?
Pardon me? Opposed, I'm sorry, Trustee Ellis.
And abstentions? None, so that motion is carried. I think that came out 9 in favor, 1 opposed. And thank you very much to staff for all your assistance with this. Next up, we have an appointment of an association representative to the Special Education Advisory Committee. Madam Director.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. Our Executive Officer, Giroux, is managing this process, and so she will bring us through this report.
Through you, Madam Chair, Easter Seals has put forward Nicole Elmark's name to be appointed as the primary member representing them on SEAC. We have asked them for an alternate member. They don't have an alternate member at this time, but they're continuing to find one, and it's recommended that the board proceed with the appointment this evening.
Thank you for that, and thank you for assembling all of the relevant policies and producing the report. Trustee Boothby.
Thank you. I'd like to move the recommendation on page 58, please.
Could you just read it out, please?
That Nicole Olmark be appointed as the primary member representing Easter Seals, Ontario to the Special Education Committee for the term ending 14 November 2022.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for that? Trustee Lyra? Is there any discussion on this? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor?
Huff in favor.
Trustee Scott, Trustee Boothby, Trustee Blackburn, Trustee Huff, Trustee Campbell, Trustee Ellis, Trustee Lyra, Trustee Penny, Trustee Bronovan, Trustee Schwartz.
And opposed? None opposed, so that is carried unanimously. And I think that brings us then to the appointment of trustees to an ad hoc supervisory officer selection committee. Notice a motion from Trustee Ellis. This is at page 71, the last page in your hard copy package. We saved the best for the last. Trustee Ellis.
Thank you. Since we have, we'll be looking for supervisory officers, it's time to strike a ad hoc supervisory officer selection committee. It's a little, as you can see, there are a number of whereases. The first one points out that the last time that we appointed a selection committee, we gave it an ending term of November 20th, or to the end of November 2019. However, in the next whereas, you'll see that ad hoc committees are automatically stood down when the board determines that the committee's assigned task has been completed. I think that since that, in my opinion, overrides the dated term, end term, that for this new ad hoc supervisory officer selection committee, we need to strike a new one. So I'd like to move the motion.
And do we have a seconder for that? Trustee Schwartz. And that means that we will also be looking for nominations, self-nominations to this committee to fulfill Part B. Trustee Schwartz, did you have something?
Yes, I would like to nominate Trustee Penny.
And do we have a seconder for that? Trustee Boothby will second that. Trustee Penny, do you accept, recognizing there are daytime meetings involved in this? Thank you. Trustee
Sorry,
Black.
Madam Chair, on a point of order, do we not have to vote on Part A before we can actually deal with Part B?
Very good point. We did that way around the last time. So let's call the question on point A, and then we will just pretend we did it a few minutes ago. We will call the question then on establishing the selection committee. All those in favor, this is a recorded vote.
Huff in favor.
Trustee Scott, Trustee Boothby, Trustee Blackburn, Trustee Huff, Trustee Campbell, Trustee Ellis, Trustee Penny, Trustee Lyra, Trustee Bronovan, Trustee Schwartz.
And opposed, and that is carried. So now we have just nominated Trustee Penny, and I'm over here with Trustee Blackburn.
I'd like to nominate Trustee Boothby.
And do we have a seconder for that? Trustee Penny will second that. Would you accept the nomination, Trustee Boothby?
Yes.
And do we have any further nominations? Trustee Blackburn?
I move that we close nominations.
Do we have a seconder for closing nominations? Trustee Bronovan? All those in favor of closing nominations? And opposed, and that is carried, which means then that trustees Penny and Boothby are to be appointed are chosen by acclamation. And so we can proceed with voting on the second part of the motion to confirm that Trustee Penny and Trustee Boothby be appointed as members of the Ad-Hoc Supervisory Officer Selection Committee. And this, of course, was already moved and seconded with Trustee Schwartz as the mover. So all those in favor? And again,
Huff in favor.
Trustee Scott, Trustee Boothby, Trustee Blackburn, Trustee Huff, Trustee Campbell, Trustee Ellis, Trustee Penny, Trustee Lyra, Trustee Bronovan, and Trustee Schwartz.
And opposed? And that is carried unanimously, and I anticipate that we will be receiving some scheduling information for the meetings of this group from staff in fairly short order.
Madam Chair, is it possible to ask a question of clarification with respect to what we just voted on?
Trustee Campbell, please go ahead.
Thank you. So in A, the mandate is to recommend the selection of a supervisory officer. Is that the full understood extent of the mandate?
Madam Director.
Through you, Madam Chair. So given the nature of the posting that was approved by trustees, we were charged with going ahead with the posting. I believe it was last week. It has been posted, and the nature of the posting indicates the selection of a supervisory officer with the opportunity for creating a eligibility list. Given since that time, and now it has been circulated through the system, we do know that we would be looking at a second person. We have not amended the posting. The posting will stand as it is, and but I don't believe that this will necessarily impact the mandate of the committee as such, given that there was an openness to hiring a supervisory officer and creating an eligibility list. I will turn to executive officer if she believes that there is an amendment that needs to be made there. Supervisory Officer Giroux.
You can recommend one for each vacancy.
Not suggesting that perhaps the pool might take care of any issue, but it's just that a strict reading of this does not extend the mandate to the formation of a pool. So, but if that is an understood part of the work of the committee, I'm happy to leave it at that. Thank you.
Typically in the past, when we have created an eligibility list, that has not been necessarily part of the beginning of the process, but has come about where there were other very highly qualified candidates that we wanted to sort of notify that they would be eligible for appointment if we had another vacancy. We haven't always had another vacancy within the duration of those eligibility lists, but it has always been part of the recommendation that would have come forward to board.
To recommend the identity of certain candidates in a pool as well?
Usually that has been what has been done.
Okay. In future, probably we need to consider that in terms of texts such as this, but as long as it's understood.
Thank you. I think it's important to have that clear. So moving forward, we have the only matter for discussion, a report from our OPSPA representatives, if any. Is this on the supervisory officer, Trustee Lyra? Pardon? So we've missed which? No, we did, that was one of the consent items at the beginning. So report from the OPSPA representatives.
None this evening, Madam Chair, but I do anticipate that we'll have at least some trickling of news coming over the weekend. So we'll deal with that at a later time. So.
Well, we have committee of the whole next week, so there will be an opportunity then. We have no matters for information this evening, so is there any new business? Trustee Widjawara. Just for clarification, is this a change in the provincial policy? Thank you for highlighting that for us, and I'm sure our staff will undertake to follow up with the changes to the regulations so that we can modify our board policy as appropriate. Any other new business this evening? Seeing none, I'd like to say thank you to everyone for some good discussion. I declare the meeting adjourned.